You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So ESPN released a sleeper for each of their top 25 players their top 25 teams in their preseason power rankings. And for the Oklahoma Sooners, they believe it is Danny Okoye, the 4-star freshman edge rusher out of Noah Homeschool Academy in the Tulsa area. And here's what Dave Wilson of ESPN College Football had to say. Freshman defensive lineman Danny Okoye arrived in Norman in January and got to work, putting on more than 20 pounds. The 6'3", 255-pound edge rusher has drawn praise from Coach Brent Venables this spring for his work ethic and athleticism. He reportedly runs a 4.56 40-yard dash. And as the Sooners try to find a rotation up front, Okoye could claim his share of playing time early on.
I'm going to be honest. He's the guy that I was kind of expecting out of the young group to actually get out there and play early. Danny is legitimately a huge human being. And it's funny because when he came on the show on Unfair Sports, he did an interview with me and my boy Coop. And we were asking him, like, so what got you into football? And he's just like, I just love the violence. Like, I love hitting people. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. We've got an edge that likes hitting people a lot. He just loves it. And he enjoys that violence in the game. That tells me that dude's going to do whatever he can to get himself on the field. And ESPN naming him the sleeper totally makes sense, right? Because coming from Noah, I think he was going to go to Jinx, but when COVID hit, he decided to stay homeschool. So he played Noah. People question his talent there or whatnot. He reminded me a lot of how Zion Williamson was when he was playing high school ball against those small Christian schools. It's like he just overpowered and was oversized compared to everybody. And they're like, oh, he's doing it to those little bitty kids. He's not going to do that at the next level. Goes to Duke and does it at the college level. And they're just like, oh, he's not going to do that at the NBA. Goes to the NBA and they're like, oh, okay, never mind. When he's healthy, he's a monster. He's a walking 27-7-7 with no problem whatsoever. That's what Danny reminded me of. The talent he went against, sure, you can have questions about that. But when you see the 4.5 40, right, you see that he's 255 pounds and he's legitimately at least 6'3". I think he's taller. When I stood next to him, I'm like, yeah, you look like more 6'4", 6'5-ish. He's a ginormous human being, but he can move that fast. Put him out there at a jack roll and let him just go attack nonstop. Him and Deshaun McCullough. Oh my goodness. He's going to wreak havoc. And I think that's going to lead to him getting play early on in his career.
Yeah, he's definitely got the tools and he's got the intangibles. The work ethic is there. Now it's just a matter of going and doing it, right? This is going to be a very fascinating story to watch and a very fascinating career because, as you mentioned, he doesn't come from the powerhouse program in Oklahoma like a Jenks or a Union or even a Booker T. Washington. No, he's coming a very different route, but that doesn't mean that we should sleep on him very much. Any other sleepers, maybe from the offensive side of the ball, that you think could be guys that break out this year?
If someone's to jump out to me on the offensive side of the ball, we talked about Fabichi Wewu. I think he's really going to end up being a legitimate opportunity to be an All-American in the SEC, at least all-conference, if not an All-American. He was a freshman All-American, and I think that he can continue to develop and grow into that. He's definitely one to keep your eyes on. But Ivan Carrion is one wide receiver. At 6'6" and his ability to move, there's a good chance that he may fight and find a way to get himself on the field just a little bit to get people's attention. If we're sticking to freshmen, he's one that I could see fighting his way on the field where they're like, look, we've got to create packages to put this dude on the field just because of the fact, not only with him being 6'6", he has a very wide catch radius, very long arms, and he can move. Right. So you would think he's a tight end, but he gives you that Mark Andrews type of downfield threat with size at the same time and some speed. So if Carry-On will be one, I would definitely keep my eyes on, as well as with the Danny Okoye. And if I was to go with the transfer side, I am still super high on Caden Woolard. Getting double-digit sacks in the MAC is not as easy as people think it is. And I feel like his game's going to translate similar to what Jared Verse did when he translated over to Florida State. I feel like he has those capabilities, even playing at that group of 5. Caden has the work ethic. That's the one thing I love about this. And you mentioned this a minute ago, not to go too long-winded, but I really appreciate that we don't have any dudes that we can say, you know what, they don't really work hard or nobody's really pushing back on that. It's like there's conversations around everybody fighting their way to get on the field. And I love hearing that. That is a very encouraging thing because that means that ain't nobody going to slack. Everybody's going to try to find a way to make sure they're getting their playing time.
Right. And whatever playing time they earn is earned. It's not given. It doesn't matter what your star status was coming out of high school, how much pub you got coming out of high school. No, whatever you get on the field, you've earned it. You've earned the opportunity to get on the field. Caden Woolard's going to be really fascinating. You mentioned it's not easy in the MAC. In these big time passing leagues where they try to get the ball out pretty quick, you're right. It is hard to get that many sacks. That's why often we didn't see big sack numbers at times in the Big 12, especially in that 2010 to 2020 range where, okay, Obo Okoronkwo might lead the team in sacks with like 6.5. And you're like, okay, that's not very many. But when teams are getting the ball out in 2 seconds or less, you're not going to get many opportunities for sacks. So very fascinating choice. Dude, could they please roll out a 3 wide receiver package with Nick Anderson, Ivan Carrion, and Jaden Gibson? Please get my triplet towers out there. Just
6'4", 6'5", 6'6".
In the goal line, inside the red zone. Just see how it runs in non-conference. Do it against Temple. Do it against Tulane, against Houston. See how it works. If it works for you, then you've got that in your back pocket as you go into SEC play. Offensively, I'm really intrigued by a guy like Taylor Tatum. Didn't arrive until summertime, but already had kind of made some noise. You're hearing some rumblings that he's been very, very impressive, even just arriving on campus and being a part of the summer workouts. So that's a guy like, as we talk about running back, we know Gavin Sawchuk's going to get fed. We know Javonte Barnes is now healthy and seemingly primed to reprise his role from the 2022 season, where he was the backup to Eric Gray and he racked up more than 500 yards as a true freshman. You got Sam Franklin. You got Caleb Hicks, who was really impressive in the spring game. Can Taylor Tatum carve out a little bit of a role for himself, either as a running back or in the kick return duties? I think they got to find a way to get him on the field somehow because he's just too good of an athlete. Defensively, aside from the true freshman, because again, I could always talk all day about Jaden Jackson. I'm really looking forward to seeing Des Malone in a full-time role. Good size, good athleticism, had a really nice career at San Diego State. Obviously, Oklahoma brings him in, I think, to be a significant player, not just a backup. I think they're planning on him and banking on him, pushing for a starting role, and you get him in and where he specializes in zone coverage. And hopefully that can help. If you've got him and Gentry Williams at your cornerback spots, two guys that do really well in zone, I think it bodes well for Oklahoma's defense this year.
No, I agree with you 100%. Des Malone is one of those players that he's a specialist. He's really, really good in the amount of starts that he had at San Diego State in the zone range. Yeah. I'm really intrigued by what he's going to do and what he's going to bring, right? I think that Kanai Walker did very well when we brought him in a couple of years ago. And adding in Dez on top of Gentry Williams. And the biggest thing with Gentry is really got to make sure that he's healthy, right? Gentry needs to be healthy. Woody coming back and them planning on roaming him around in multiple positions. Man, the secondary this year, the defense, period, I have zero concerns about. This is going to be one of the best defenses we've seen at Oklahoma in a while, especially because everybody's into the scheme and they understand their assignments. The fewer mistakes we see in this defense, the more problems it's going to be for the opposing teams.
And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. If you want more from us here on Locked On Sooners, make sure you go join the Locked On Sooners Insider Program by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. That's SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711 to get 25% off your first month with the Locked On Sooners Insider Program. Jay and I are going to be hosting Q&A sessions. We'll do prospect reviews. We'll also provide some video from this week at SEC Media Day and whatever else Jay gets up to. That'll be in the Locked On Sooners Insider Program as well. We'll share our insight, some intel. If you got questions that you want us to answer, make sure you go join us. Again, SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711 to get 25% off your first month over at the Locked On Sooners Insider Program. Follow Jay on Twitter all week long for updates and intel from SEC Media Days at Unfair Sports. Follow myself at John 9 Williams, observing from afar as I do the family thing with the youngins. But cannot wait to break down what happens and what everybody has to say about Oklahoma and how they think Oklahoma's not going to do very well this year in the SEC. We'll react to all that coming up this week here on Locked On Sooners. So stay tuned, subscribe to the show. And for your second listen, again, go check out Locked On SEC with our man Chris Gordy here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where we cover your team every single day. But for Jay Smith, I'm John Williams. We'll catch you next time. Boomer
Sooner.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the win is also what keeps your ride or die alive. Go to ebaymotors.com, where they have over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers.